A few years ago, a friend of ours decided that he wanted a wartime tea van to sell tea and make tea for everybody at 1940s events. And it became very apparent that there were very, very few original examples left, and the chances of finding one to restore or finding one to buy were fairly slim. So we looked at lots of photographs and decided that we could probably build one. So we went off looking for parts, and this is the result. These were built because there were lots of organisations who suddenly had the need to feed a lot of people in fairly awkward circumstances because of bombing raids and because they were being moved away from home and so forth. And the fire service needed them because they were operating what they call fire convoys, and they were moving fire crews and appliances from one part of the country to another to deal with bombing raids and emergencies, and they needed some sort of catering in place to be able to do that. So they built very quickly these caravans. One of the things that was difficult about building this, and is always difficult about building and rebuilding wartime vehicles, is there's a danger of over-restoring. But you've got to over-restore to a certain extent because they were built in a tearing hurry and the quality wasn't really very good. But now we're spending a lot of money and a lot of time either rebuilding or recreating these things. We've got to build them a little bit better in terms of how long they're going to last and how durable they're going to be. And so we used aluminium instead of hardboard sheet for the outside of this and things like that. So it's not absolutely authentic because we can't make it absolutely authentic or else it'll fall to pieces in 6 months. And it's one of those very difficult balancing acts that you have to do when you're restoring or making a replica of a wartime munitions quality vehicle. So when we started doing this, we had lots of discussions about how to do it, and we were initially thinking about building it on a lorry chassis so it was self-propelled. But the problem with 1940s lorries and 1930s lorries is they're very, very slow, and lots of them are actually rather too slow to use on modern roads. And also that a lot of 1940s events are a long, long way away from where we're based. So we decided in the end that a trailer was historically correct, and we had plenty of photographs of them in use. And if an event is close to home, then it can be towed by a 1940s car, and if not, it can go on the back of a Range Rover or a Land Cruiser or something, and then it can do distances. There were several conundrums and challenges and things that we needed to balance doing this. Firstly, it needed to be as authentic as we possibly could make it, and but equally, firstly, in a way, it needed to be functional, and it needed to conform to at least enough of the modern regulations that we could get it past its certificates and things of that sort. So it needs kitchen facilities that work. So we fitted a sink which uncovers and has a water supply which is electrically powered, which probably wouldn't have been during the war, but it's fairly unobtrusive. And we fitted a stove, which is a modern one, runs off propane gas, and we have a gas burco which is all plumbed in and on heat sink board and so forth. And on this side we've got a nicely hidden fridge again, and power points and USB points that are hidden out of public view. And this is the burco for tea that's already made, so it's ready to be served. And then we have drawers for utensils and so forth, and they've all got lift on them so they don't come over in transit. And then these drawers are the ones for crockery and so forth. And they have a gauze bottom so that they drain, so they can equally be taken right out of the vehicle and used as a draining board. And all this detail is stuff that we picked up looking at photographs of volunteers running these caravans during the war, during the Blitz and so forth. But when we built the thing, we were very careful to hide anything modern out of the way and use as many old fittings and so forth as possible. So you won't find any posi drive screws or anything like that on show. The other concession to the modern world really is a mains hookup and a battery and a charging system. Lots of people ask why it's grey, and that's because during the war pigment for red paint was very short, in short supply, and they formed the National Fire Service because before the war there were lots and lots of different fire services and quite often their equipment didn't match. So in 1941 they formed the National Fire Service, and all the vehicles were painted battleship grey because that's what the Home Office had got access to lots and lots and lots of. And ambulances and vehicles of that kind, and even on aircraft that the RAF used, there's quite often a legend like this that says who donated the vehicle and donated the money for it. One of the things I can tell you is that you can completely fabricate a vehicle like this from just the chassis and bits of the chassis and authentic parts, and everything else, the wooden frame and everything else is built completely new. And the one thing that people will notice and say, oh, I like the spoon on the chain,